This woman, Madison, 24 years old, thought she found her upgrade. She traded her devoted boyfriend for a man with designer watches and expensive cars. She believed she deserved champagne instead of cheap wine, luxury instead of loyalty. But here's what nobody told her. Sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's fake. And by the time she realized it, she was 5 months pregnant, completely broke, and watching her ex-boyfriend build the dream life she threw away. This is Madison's story, and I'm Emma, here to share it with you. 2 years ago, Madison was in a relationship with someone named Thomas. He was 26, worked in technology support, helping people fix their computer problems every single day. Thomas was kind, gentle, the type of man who remembered small details about your day. But to Madison, he represented everything ordinary, everything predictable, everything she thought she'd outgrown. Their Friday nights followed the same pattern without fail. Thomas would pick up inexpensive takeout from their favorite local spot. They'd settle onto his worn couch and watch documentaries on streaming services. By 10 o'clock, they were in bed because Thomas valued his sleep schedule like it was written in stone. Madison was 22 then, restless, hungry for something she couldn't quite name. She'd look at Thomas in his faded t-shirts and think, "We're too young to live like retired people." But Thomas seemed content with his simple routine, his quiet existence, his modest life. What really started bothering Madison was how Thomas approached money. He wasn't poor by any measure, but he was incredibly careful with every dollar. She'd watch him cut coupons from newspaper inserts like someone from a different generation. He'd drive 15 extra miles just to save 40 cents per gallon on gasoline. His vehicle embarrassed her deeply. An old Honda that made strange sounds whenever he turned left, with a passenger door that required 2 hands and serious force to open properly. Madison cringed every time her friends saw her climbing out of that car. When she'd gently suggest maybe it was time for an upgrade, Thomas would launch into explanations about reliability, about having no car payment, about how transportation was simply a tool to get from one place to another. His wardrobe wasn't much better, maybe 4 complete outfits total, all purchased from discount retailers having clearance sales. Madison would hint about shopping together, about updating his style, about investing in quality clothing. Thomas would shrug and say his clothes served their purpose. Purpose, function, practicality. Never passion, never excitement, never luxury. Meanwhile, Madison worked part-time at an exclusive fitness center in the downtown area. Every day, she was surrounded by successful men in perfectly tailored business suits, wearing watches that cost more than Thomas made in 3 months. These men had presence, confidence, the kind of energy that filled a room. Then she'd come home to Thomas in his graphic tees and khaki pants, and the contrast felt unbearable. Thomas wasn't unkind or mean-spirited. He was just invisible. When they'd go out with Madison's friend group, he'd sit quietly in the corner while everyone else discussed their careers, their international trips, their ambitious plans. Her friend Melissa's boyfriend surprised her with a vacation to Las Vegas for her birthday, complete with shows and 5-star restaurants. Her coworker Rachel's partner took her on a spontaneous weekend spa retreat in the mountains. What did Thomas do for Madison's birthday? He cooked an elaborate dinner at home and wrote her a 3-page card about their relationship, about how much she meant to him, about all the little moments they'd shared together. Madison smiled when she opened it. She said all the right things. But inside, she wanted to throw something. Where was the surprise trip? Where was the jewelry? Where was the grand gesture that she could photograph and post online? She started noticing how other men looked at her when Thomas wasn't standing right there. Really looked at her, with appreciation, with interest, with desire. Madison wasn't being conceited. She knew she was attractive. She worked out 5 days every week, maintained her appearance carefully, dressed well, knew how to present herself. But with Thomas, she felt like all that effort went unnoticed. He rarely complimented her appearance unless she directly asked for validation. He never posted their photos together on social media. He seemed to take her for granted. The financial thing became an obsession for Madison. They split every expense exactly 50-50, which sounds fair and equal on the surface, but it didn't feel fair to her. She made significantly less money at her reception position, yet Thomas never offered to cover a larger portion of their dates or shared expenses. He'd suggest cheap restaurants or free activities in the park. When Madison wanted to try somewhere upscale, somewhere Instagram-worthy, he'd hesitate and question whether they really needed to spend that much money on one meal. One particular evening stuck in her memory like a painful splinter. They were eating at this small diner Thomas loved because the portions were generous for the price. Madison watched him calculate the tip with intense focus, making sure it was exactly 15%. Not 16, not 17, exactly 15, because some financial advice article he'd read said that was the appropriate amount. At the table next to them, another man casually left a $20 bill on a $12 check without even counting it. That moment crystallized something for Madison. She was with someone who thought small about absolutely everything in life. Thomas never discussed their future in any concrete terms either. Sure, he'd mentioned possibly moving to a slightly larger apartment eventually, or maybe taking a vacation somewhere next year. But it was all vague and non-committal. No real ambition, no drive to build something bigger and better. He seemed perfectly satisfied with his little computer repair job and his tiny, comfortable world. But Madison wanted more. She believed she deserved more. That's when she really started noticing Derek at the fitness center where she worked. He'd been coming in for months, but suddenly Madison saw him differently. The way he carried himself with absolute confidence, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he commanded attention whenever he spoke. He was everything Thomas wasn't. When Derek started asking about her work and actually seemed to listen to her answers, when he complimented her dress and appeared genuinely interested in knowing her better, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in months. She felt valuable. She felt seen. Derek began staying a few extra minutes after his workouts to chat with Madison at the front desk. Nothing inappropriate at first, just friendly conversation. He'd ask thoughtful questions about her day, remember details she'd mentioned in previous conversations, make her laugh with entertaining stories about his career in finance. He had this gift for making Madison feel like the most fascinating person in any room, which was drastically different from Thomas's distracted half-listening while scrolling through his phone. The text messaging started innocently enough. Derek asked for her number to notify her if he'd be running late for a training session he'd booked. Then it naturally evolved from there. Good morning messages, funny content throughout the day, questions about how her shift was going. Thomas never texted during work hours unless it was something practical, like asking what she wanted him to pick up for dinner. But Derek made Madison feel like he was thinking about her constantly throughout his busy, important day. She started hiding her phone screen whenever Thomas was nearby. Not because anything physical was happening with Derek, but because she knew Thomas wouldn't understand the connection she was developing. Thomas was already making uncomfortable comments about all the wealthy men who frequented her gym, about how she seemed to enjoy her job much more lately. The first time Derek suggested meeting for coffee outside of work, Madison almost declined. Almost. But then she remembered how Thomas had completely forgotten their 6-month anniversary the previous week. How he'd seemed more interested in some computer game than spending quality time with her lately. So she said yes. Just coffee between friends. Nothing wrong with that, right? That coffee meeting changed everything for Madison. Derek chose this charming little cafe downtown that she'd mentioned wanting to visit, but Thomas had dismissed as too expensive for just coffee. Derek ordered without glancing at prices, tipped the barista generously, and gave Madison his complete, undivided attention for 2 full hours. He asked about her goals, her dreams, what she truly wanted from life. He listened to every answer and responded with thoughtful insights. Not like Thomas, who'd nod along while obviously thinking about something completely different. The coffee dates with Derek became weekly, then twice weekly. Madison told Thomas she was meeting girlfriends or working late shifts. Technically, she wasn't lying about anything physical happening, but she knew she was crossing serious emotional boundaries. Derek never pushed for more, but the chemistry between them was undeniable. The way he'd touch her hand when emphasizing a point, how he'd compliment her appearance sincerely, the way he talked about wanting to take her to upscale restaurants and show her how she deserved to be treated. Thomas started noticing Madison's mood swings, how she was euphoric on some days and irritable on others. He'd ask what was bothering her when she seemed distant. But how could she explain that she was comparing him to someone else and he was falling short in every single category? When Thomas tried to be affectionate now, it felt suffocating instead of comforting. The breaking point arrived when Thomas's computer completely crashed, and he spent an entire weekend trying to fix it himself, instead of spending time with Madison. She'd suggested going for a scenic drive or getting lunch somewhere nice, but he was completely consumed with recovering his files and restoring his system. Meanwhile, Derek had texted asking if she wanted to visit the art museum that had just opened a new exhibit everyone was talking about. Madison picked a fight that Sunday evening about how Thomas never prioritized their relationship anymore. He looked genuinely confused and hurt, which only made her angrier. How could he not see how disconnected they'd become? The argument escalated until Madison finally said what she'd been thinking for weeks, that maybe they wanted fundamentally different things and weren't as compatible as they'd believed. The actual breakup happened 2 weeks later. When Thomas asked directly if there was someone else, Madison couldn't look him in the eyes and tell the truth. She lied. She told him there wasn't anyone else, which was technically true in the physical sense, but she could see in his face that he didn't believe her. "You're being paranoid and controlling," she told him, which shut him up immediately. Thomas hated confrontation, and he definitely didn't want to appear as the jealous, insecure boyfriend. Madison found herself listing every single thing that bothered her about Thomas: his clothes, his spending habits, his lack of ambition, his boring hobbies, his embarrassing vehicle. She was cruel about it, far crueler than necessary. But she'd been holding back these feelings for so long, and they all came flooding out at once. "If you're this unhappy, maybe we should take a break," Thomas finally said quietly. "Maybe we should break up completely," Madison corrected him. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore." Thomas cried. Actually cried, sitting there asking what he'd done wrong and if there was anything he could possibly do to fix things. Madison felt bad watching him break down, but she was already emotionally checked out. She felt guilty but also relieved that it was finally over. Madison and Derek's first official date was everything she'd been missing with Thomas. Derek picked her up in his luxury BMW, took her to an upscale restaurant she'd only seen on social media, ordered wine without checking the price, and treated her like she was the most captivating woman in the world. Within 2 weeks, they were officially together, and Madison was posting photos constantly. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to nearby cities, shopping dates where Derek would buy her things just because he wanted to see her smile. She heard through mutual friends that Thomas was taking the breakup really hard, but honestly, Madison felt like she'd won the lottery. Traded up from a Honda to a BMW, from takeout dinners to 5-star experiences, from a man who clipped coupons to a man who never even looked at price tags. 3 months into dating Derek, Madison missed her period. At first, she wasn't concerned at all. But when she was late by 2 weeks, she finally took a test. 2 pink lines that completely changed everything in about 30 seconds. She was pregnant. Her first reaction wasn't panic or fear. It was actually excitement. Derek and she had been discussing the future lately, and he'd mentioned wanting children eventually. She'd been hoping he'd suggest moving in together or making things more permanent. This felt like fate pushing them in that direction. Madison planned an entire romantic reveal. She made his favorite dinner, lit candles everywhere, wore the dress he'd bought her the previous week. She expected him to be surprised, but ultimately happy, maybe even excited about taking the next step together. His reaction was nothing like she'd imagined. "Are you absolutely sure?" was the first thing he said. Not congratulations, not asking how she felt about it, just questioning whether she was actually pregnant. When she showed him the test, his entire expression changed. He got this cold, calculating look she'd never witnessed before. "This is a serious problem," he said flatly. "I'm not ready to be a father, and honestly, neither are you. You're 24 years old. You work part-time at a gym. How exactly did you think this was going to work?" The way he said it, like she was some naive child who'd gotten herself into trouble, made Madison furious. "I thought we'd figure it out together," she said. "You know, like couples do." He actually laughed at her. "Madison, we've been dating for 3 months. This isn't some long-term committed relationship. We're having fun together, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to completely rearrange my entire life." That's when he brought up what he carefully called options. He was very careful about his wording, but essentially he wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. He said it would be the smart, practical choice that they could go back to enjoying their relationship without this complication. Then Derek's mother called Madison directly. She didn't even know he'd told his family, but apparently he had. Rebecca, his mother, asked if they could meet for lunch to discuss what she called the situation. The lunch meeting was at an expensive restaurant downtown, and Rebecca showed up dressed like she was attending a corporate board meeting. She didn't waste any time with small talk or pleasantries. "Derek told me about your pregnancy," she said coolly. "I want you to know that our family is prepared to help you handle this situation appropriately." She pulled out an envelope from her designer handbag. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a business card for a clinic across town. "This should cover all your expenses," she said matter-of-factly, "plus a little extra for your trouble and inconvenience. Derek is a good boy, but he's not ready for the responsibilities of fatherhood. I'm sure you understand." "You want to pay me to get rid of your grandchild?" Madison asked, stunned. "I want to pay you to make a smart, practical decision," she corrected coldly. "You seem like a nice enough girl, but let's be realistic about what kind of future you'd have trying to trap my son with a pregnancy. Derek has options, Madison. Beautiful, educated women from good families who understand what it means to be part of our world. You work at a gym." After Madison told Derek she was keeping the baby, everything changed overnight. No more fancy dinners, no more weekend getaways, no more events with his friends and colleagues. When she'd ask about plans for the weekend, he'd claim he was busy or had family obligations. But she'd see photos on his social media of him out with his friends doing exactly the kinds of things they used to do together. Then the criticism started. Suddenly, everything Madison did irritated him. The way she dressed was too casual. Her job at the gym was embarrassing. Her friends were too dramatic. Her family was too involved in her life. The emotional abuse was subtle initially, but it intensified as the weeks passed. He'd forget to return her calls for hours, then act like she was being clingy and needy when she'd ask where he'd been. When she'd get upset about his behavior, he'd flip it around on her. "You're being so emotional lately," he'd say dismissively. "Maybe the pregnancy hormones are making you irrational and unreasonable." The final breaking point came when Madison was about 4 months pregnant. They were at some work function of his, and one of his colleagues' wives asked cheerfully when they were getting married. Before Madison could respond, Derek jumped in quickly. "Oh, we're not there yet," he said casually. "Still figuring things out." The woman looked confused and glanced at Madison's obviously pregnant belly. "The baby was unplanned," he finished coldly. "We're taking things one step at a time." On the drive home, Madison finally exploded. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of all those people?" "I was being honest," he said flatly. "We're not engaged. We haven't talked about marriage. Why should I lie about our situation?" He pulled the car over and turned to look at her with an expression she'd never seen before, completely void of warmth. "Listen carefully, Madison, because I'm only going to explain this once. I never asked you to get pregnant. I told you what I thought was the best solution, and you chose to ignore my advice. That's your choice to make, but don't expect me to rearrange my entire life plan because you decided to keep a baby I explicitly said I didn't want." "You didn't want the baby, or you don't want me?" Madison asked, her voice breaking. "I don't want either of you," he said quietly, looking straight ahead. After Derek basically told Madison he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby, she was about 5 months pregnant, financially broke, and suddenly completely alone. That's when the desperation truly set in. She started thinking about Thomas constantly, how stable and reliable he was, how he never would have abandoned her like this, how he actually loved her for who she was, not what she looked like or how she made him appear to others. Madison started checking his social media obsessively. At first, his posts were exactly what she'd expected. Sad quotes about heartbreak, photos of him looking thin and exhausted. But then something shifted. His posts started getting different, better, healthier. He'd posted a photo of himself at some technology conference, looking genuinely put together and professional. Then there were pictures of him doing things she'd never seen before. Hiking in nature, attending concerts, trying new restaurants. The real devastating blow came when she saw a photo of him with a woman. She wasn't tagged in the post, but they were clearly together as a couple. She was naturally pretty, wearing minimal makeup, laughing genuinely at something he'd said. She looked normal, real, like someone who'd find Thomas's computer stories actually interesting instead of boring. Madison decided to reach out to Thomas. She told herself it was just to apologize for how things ended, maybe reconnect as friends. But honestly, she was hoping he'd see how much she needed him and step up to help rescue her from this mess. She started with a casual text message. "Hey, I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you lately. Hope you're doing well." He didn't respond for 3 full days. When he finally did, it was just, "I'm doing fine. Hope you are too." Madison tried again a week later. "I know things ended badly between us, and I've been wanting to apologize properly. Could we maybe talk sometime?" Another long delay then. "I appreciate that, but I don't think it's necessary. I've moved on with my life, and I think you should too." So Madison did something she's not proud of. She showed up at his apartment unannounced. He'd moved since they broke up, to a small house with an actual yard and everything. When he opened the door and saw her standing there, very obviously pregnant, his face went completely blank. "Madison, what are you doing here?" he asked carefully. His new place was clean and beautifully decorated, way nicer than anywhere they'd lived when they were together. There were framed photos on the walls of him with people she didn't recognize, doing activities that looked genuinely fun and fulfilling. "I wanted to apologize," she started, her voice shaking, "for how things ended between us. I know I hurt you badly, and I've regretted it every single day since." "Okay, apology accepted. Is that everything?" His coldness shocked her to her core. This was Thomas, who used to hang on her every word, who'd do absolutely anything to make her happy. Now he was treating her like a complete stranger. "The guy I left you for, Derek, it didn't work out," she continued desperately. "He's not the person I thought he was at all." "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, but he didn't sound sorry whatsoever. "But I'm not sure what that has to do with me anymore." Madison broke down completely and told him everything, about Derek's family treating her like trash, about him abandoning her when he found out about the pregnancy, about how alone and terrified she was. Thomas listened to the entire story without interrupting once. Then he said simply, "That sounds really difficult. I genuinely hope things work out for you." "What exactly are you expecting from me, Madison?" he continued evenly. "You broke up with me to be with someone else. You told me I wasn't good enough for you, that I was boring and small and embarrassing. Now that things didn't work out the way you planned, you want me to what? Take you back? Raise another man's child? Be your backup plan when your first choice didn't work out?" "What we had," he said slowly, "was you settling for me until something that looked better came along. And when it did, you dropped me without a second thought. I'm not interested in being your safety net now." "I think you should leave," he finally said. "I have plans tonight." "Please, Thomas, I need help," Madison begged. "I have nowhere else to turn." "That's not my problem anymore," he said firmly. "You made your choice, Madison. Now you need to live with the consequences." 2 years later, and Madison is sitting in her tiny apartment at 1 a.m, listening to her daughter Sophia cry in the next room while she scrolls through social media on her phone with a cracked screen she can't afford to fix. This is her life now. Working 3 different part-time jobs just to afford daycare and rent. Living paycheck to paycheck. Exhausted every single moment. Derek pays exactly what the court ordered him to pay in child support, not a penny more. He's never even met Sophia, not once. Madison's parents help when they can, but they're not wealthy either and have their own financial struggles. The worst part is watching Thomas's life unfold on social media, like some success story she's not allowed to be part of anymore. Remember that woman from the photos? Her name is Claire, and they got married last year. She looked absolutely beautiful in this simple, elegant dress, and Thomas looked happier than Madison had ever seen him during their entire relationship. Claire works as a therapist, and from what Madison can piece together from social media, she actually appreciates Thomas's quiet, steady personality. She seems to think his thoughtfulness and reliability are wonderful qualities, not boring flaws. The real devastating blow came 6 months ago when they announced they're expecting their first child together. Thomas posted this sweet photo of them holding a sonogram picture with a caption about how excited and blessed he feels to become a father. Madison found herself staring at that photo for way too long, thinking about how completely different her life would be if she hadn't been so foolish and superficial. Thomas would have been absolutely thrilled when she got pregnant. They would have figured everything out together, made plans, been excited about their future as a family. Madison ran into them at the grocery store a few months ago, and it was absolutely brutal. Thomas looked amazing, really amazing, confident, happy, genuinely successful. He'd started his own computer consulting business and was doing well enough that they'd bought a house in one of the nicer neighborhoods in town. Claire was visibly pregnant, but glowing in that way pregnant women do when they're actually excited about their pregnancy and have complete support from their partner. They were polite but distant when they saw Madison with Sophia in her stroller. Madison could tell Thomas had told Claire about their history, and she probably saw Madison as this cautionary tale about his past, a reminder of what he'd escaped. The thing that really messed with Madison's head was seeing how Thomas naturally interacted with Sophia. He was gentle and patient when she got fussy, naturally wonderful with children in a way that reminded Madison why she'd fallen for him in the first place. For one brief moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like if things had been different. But that fantasy lasted about 30 seconds before reality crashed back in. Thomas has moved on completely. He has a wife who genuinely loves him for exactly who he is, a baby on the way that he actually wants and planned for, and a successful business that lets him provide well for his family. Sometimes Madison wonders if Thomas ever thinks about what could have been, but she seriously doubts it. Why would he? He's got everything now that she was too blind and shallow to see he could become. Madison is the one stuck looking backward, full of regret, while he's building the beautiful future she could have shared with him. So here she is, stuck in this difficult life she created for herself through her own choices, watching her ex-boyfriend live happily ever after with someone who was smart enough to appreciate what she had right in front of her. Madison tells herself that she's just having temporary bad luck, that things will improve eventually, that she deserves better than this difficult situation. But late at night, when Sophia's finally asleep and the apartment is quiet except for the sound of her own thoughts, she knows the absolute truth. She had better. She had someone who truly loved her, and she threw it all away for something that looked more exciting and glamorous on the surface. Now she's paying the price for that choice every single day, and nobody's coming to rescue her from the mess she made for herself. The worst part is that Madison would probably make the same mistakes all over again. Even knowing how it ends, even seeing where those choices got her, she's not sure she's actually changed enough deep down to make different choices next time, if presented with the same situation. And that realization might be the most pathetic and heartbreaking thing of all. This is Madison's story, and I'm Emma, your storyteller here on Mrs. Emma. Sometimes we don't realize the value of what we have until it's gone forever. Sometimes we chase what looks shiny and exciting, only to discover it was all surface with nothing underneath. And sometimes, by the time we learn these lessons, it's already too late to go back and make different choices. If this story touched you, if it made you think, if it reminded you to appreciate the people who truly love you for who you are, please hit that like button below. Share this video with your friends who might need to hear Madison's story. And don't forget to subscribe to Mrs. Emma so you never miss these powerful, real-life stories that remind us all about the consequences of our choices. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember to value the people who value you. This is Emma, signing off.